Leonie Kiefer reached past the filling bucket and pulled the handle off the tap. The water stopped mid-pour. The bare spindle stood wet in the wall. "This outlet is closed," she said. "It came off the schedule 2 years ago. Use the one by the bins." 2 residents watched from their doorways on the top landing of Aldous House and looked at the carpet. A contractor behind her went on writing on his clipboard. Nobody spoke. Nobody in that building ever did. 33-year-old plus-size cleaner Luzia Dapunt looked at the bare spindle, then at her half-filled bucket. She did not raise her voice, and she did not put the bucket down. She turned her shoulder through the doorway, the way she had turned it through every doorway in 14 buildings for 2 years. And she asked the contractor whether the man in the flat below had got his hot water back yet. Leonie Kiefer put the tap handle in her coat pocket. She went down in the lift and did not look up, so Luzia carried the bucket down 5 flights to the bin store, filled it there, and carried it back up. It took her 17 minutes. She washed the top landing and the 2 stairwells above the lift head, because they were on her sheet and because nobody else ever wanted them. The man came up the last flight behind her at 8:10. Tall black coat, no hurry in him at all. He took the bucket out of her hands without asking and carried it the final turn. "Who took the handle?" "Nothing happened, sir. The outlet is being decommissioned. Leave the landing. Come down." "It's half done." She wrung the cloth out. "I'd rather it wasn't." She had no idea that the man carrying her bucket owned Aldous House and the 13 buildings behind it, and a name that ended. Osmond Vautier was 42 years old and had never in his life been inside one of his own plant rooms. He found out that morning that he could not get a tap handle back. The caretaker's office at Aldous House smelled of tea and brake cleaner. Osmond stood with his coat still on and asked 3 questions, and the answers took the caretaker somewhere he did not want to go. "Who closed the top landing outlets?" "Kiefer, sir." "Their schedule." "Which of my staff approved that?" "It's not approved, sir. It's just what's written." "And the flushing book?" The caretaker looked at his hands. "I stopped writing the top landings in. I was told they weren't on it anymore." The kettle clicked off, and nobody poured it. Outside the window, a wood pigeon walked the whole length of the wall and back. "You were told by whom?" "Their engineer. 2 years back. Maybe more. And you knew it was wrong." "I knew it was odd." Osmond nodded once and did not raise his voice, and the caretaker went the color of the wall anyway. Not because a threat had been made, because a quiet man had asked him a question in his own office and he had not been able to answer it. He went up to the top landing afterwards and asked the 2 residents who had watched. "Did you see it?" "I saw her take something off the tap," said the woman from the end flat. "And you?" "I went in," said the man opposite. "I'm sorry. I went inside, and I shut my door. Thank you." That was all he said to either of them. Not one word about courage. Not one word about what they might have done instead. Both of them stood in their own hallways afterwards, feeling worse than any telling off could have made them feel. And both of them were at the residents' coffee morning a month later, sitting nearer the front than they had ever sat. Osmond made one telephone call. He gave a number at Sarrett's, the builder's merchant on the ring road, and nothing else. No name, no account, no address. 9 men in that county could use that number, and 2 of them were dead. A van came before 11 with a new spindle head, a boxed lock shield, and 2 spare handles in a paper bag. No invoice for it ever appeared anywhere that year, or any year. He found her at the sluice on the top, landing with the new handle already on, and her hand under the running water. "Feel that," she said. He did not think about it. She took his wrist, put his hand under the tap, and held it there, still talking, the way she would have moved a chair out of a doorway. "Cold water should be under 20 degrees inside 2 minutes. That is nearly warm, and it has been running the whole time you were on the stairs." "Meaning what?" "Meaning it sits somewhere on the way here." She let go of his wrist and turned the tap off. "Sorry, your sleeve." Neither of them said anything about her hand on his wrist. Neither of them ever would. "I'll have you moved to another building," he said. "Please don't." She lifted the bucket. "This one's got the worst landing on the rotor. If I go, whoever comes after me gets it and they'll be new." She said it the way another person would decline a biscuit. Then she went back to work with a burst blister on her palm and a wet cuff, and Osmond Vautier stood on a landing he had never stood on before and looked at a tap. He had bought these buildings as a line on a page. 14 blocks, long leases, average resident age 71, safe, dull, endlessly renewable. He had signed off £3,100,000 of pipework replacement across 7 years in staged payments on the recommendation of a woman he had known socially for a decade. He had never once asked to see the pipe. That week he did something the group's directors could not account for. He read the cleaning rota. Monday he was at Brentmere House before 8 in the morning in the way, and the radiator at the top of the stairwell was cold and had been cold for 2 winters. On Tuesday it was hot. Nobody could say who had bled it. Luzia ate her sandwich standing next to it with her back against the wall and did not mention it to anybody, and it stayed hot all winter. Tuesday, at Alda's house, there was a second bucket standing full at the top landing when she got up there still steaming. She looked at it for a while. Then she used it, and she washed the bucket out and left it upside down where she had found it, and the next Tuesday it was full again. Wednesday was Pallister House, where a notice had been taped inside the lift for 2 years saying back in 10 minutes. "He's having a long 10 minutes, Luzia said in passing to nobody. The window cleaner laughed so hard he had to sit down on the step. The girl from the agency, who was 19 and had been crying in the bin store since 8:30, laughed too, and that was the point of it. The girl had put a pole through a sash window on the half landing. 200 and something pounds of glass, and a supervisor coming at noon. "He'll take it off my hours," she said. "I've only got the hours." "He won't." "How do you know?" "Because when he asks who was carrying it, somebody's going to say it was me." The girl said no 3 times, and cried again, and Luzia went on doing the brass on the letterboxes and letter. At noon the supervisor came, and Luzia said she had swung the pole round on the turn, without looking, which was not true, and she signed the sheet for it, and it came out of that week's pay. She got the bus home an hour late and did not tell anybody about that either. The supervisor mentioned it in an email to the group's property office as an example of the agency's accountability procedures, and that was how Osmond Vautier came to read in a monthly report that a woman he could not find on his Brown own rota had paid £211 for a window she had not broken. Thursday she did his own house. He was not there. He came home at 9 to a kitchen that smelled of nothing at all, and a note on the table saying his keys were in the pocket of the coat he had left over the banister because she had moved the coat and did not want him to think anything had gone missing. He kept the note. He did not know why he kept the note. It sat in the drawer of the hall table under a pile of things that mattered a great deal more, and it was still there a year later. Friday, Alda's house again, and Leonie Kiefer came up in the lift with 2 men and a folder. She looked at the tap. She looked at the handle on it. I hear the handle came back. "Yes, madam." How resourceful. Then she was gone, and the lift doors closed on her, and the whole thing had taken 11 seconds. Nobody on that landing moved until the machinery had stopped humming. That night, Osmond sat with the agency rota in front of him. 14 buildings, 5 days, a woman in every one of them at 7:30 in the morning. He read down the Wednesday column, and then the Thursday column, and then all of it again. Her name was not on it anywhere. There was a shift code and a site code and a box for hours. He had been paying for her for 2 years, and his own paperwork did not know she existed. The coffee morning at Brentmere House happened on the first Wednesday of the month in the residence lounge, and it ran on tea shortbread, and the deaths page of the local paper read out loud. That was how it reached her. Norris Ballard, said a woman with a magnifying glass. 91. Caretaker at the Corvin Club for 19 years. She held the paper further away. Family thanks the district nurses and the engineer from the water company who kept coming back after everybody else stopped. He'd have liked that somebody said, "It says he never trusted the leach lines." The what? That's what it says here. The leech lines. "Dead legs," said Luzia. The room turned round. She was on her knees with a dustpan under the tea urn. "Sorry. Dead legs. It's a bit of pipe going nowhere. Water sits in it and never moves, and it gets warm, and the warm bit feeds everything else." She heard herself and stopped, and the stopping was louder than the sentence. "It's just a thing they say." An old man in a cardigan looked at her for a long moment. The woman with the magnifying glass lowered the paper. Somebody's cup went down on a saucer and stayed there. "How do you know that, love? You pick things up." She stood and took the dustpan out to the bin and did not come back in for 11 minutes. Nobody asked her anything else, because in that room nobody ever asked anybody anything, and the moment closed over like water. But 3 people mentioned it that afternoon to somebody else, which is how anything moves in a building where the average age is 71. Osmond was at the back with a stack of chairs in his arms. He carried them out to the car park, and she came out with the urn, and neither of them mentioned pipes. "You take the long way round the back of Pallister," he said. "It adds a quarter of an hour. There's a dog. You're frightened of a dog." "No. There's a dog, and he waits at the gate. And if I go the short way, he doesn't get to walk me down to the corner." She set the urn on the wall. "He's got a bad hip. It's the only walk he gets." "Whose dog is it?" "Nobody's. That's the trouble with him." She squinted at the sky. "He'd be all right if he'd stop telling everyone. You could take him. I've got a landing window and a gas ring. Then somebody should take him. Somebody should take a lot of things." She picked the urn back up like it weighed nothing. "He's had 2 winters of it, and he's still going down to the gate. You have to admire the optimism, do you?" "Well, somebody has to." Osmond found that he was still standing there after she had gone in. He did not ask anyone about her. He had spent a working lifetime asking other people questions. Instead, he did something he had not done since he was 19 years old, which was go and look for himself. The plant room under Alda's house was 8 steps down and smelled of hot dust. He went in alone with a torch on a Sunday morning in his own building, and he found the tags. They were stainless, cut by hand, drilled and wired onto the valves. Somebody had made them on a lathe because paper labels kept falling off in the wet. Each one carried 2 letters and a month. He counted 9 in that plant room. He found 14 more at Brentmere and another set at Pallister on risers, on strainers, on a dead branch, behind the calorifier with a warning scratched into the metal in tiny capitals. "Cut back or cap. Do not leave." He turned one over with his thumb. The edges had been filed so that nobody putting a hand up into the dark would take the skin off it. Whoever made these had thought about a stranger's hand long after she was gone. 40 of them across 3 buildings, all in the same hand, all stopping in the same month. He stood in a cellar with a torch on a piece of wire and understood that a person had once loved these buildings and that the loving had ended on a particular date. Löbel. He did not ring the agency and ask. He could have known her whole history by lunchtime, and it would have taken 1 telephone call, and he did not make it. And afterwards he could not entirely explain why, except that it would have felt like opening her post. On the Thursday he followed her. He did it badly in his own car. 3 vehicles back on the ring road, feeling like a man doing something disgraceful. She got off the bus outside Whitecross General with a carrier bag and went in through the outpatients' entrance the way people go into their own kitchens. Fenwick Ward, 3rd floor. Long stay. 6 beds and a window with a view of the car park roof. The lift was full, so she took the stairs 3 flights and came out at the top, still doing up the buttons on her cardigan and not out of breath. She said good afternoon to the ward clerk by name. She said it to the cleaner in the corridor as well, and the cleaner said it back, and the 2 of them had a whole conversation in about 9 words. Then she sat down beside an old woman with white hair and took her hand and started talking. She talked for 40 minutes about the dog at Pallister and his terrible opinion of the postman, about a man on the 2nd floor who had bought a bread machine and would not read the book that came with it, about the price of the bus going up and a wood pigeon that walked the whole length of a wall instead of flying, and how somebody ought to have a word with it. She never once said anything sad. She never once asked a question she knew would not be answered. She talked the way you talk to somebody in the next chair, on an ordinary afternoon, in an ordinary year, and every so often she stopped and waited a beat in case. The old woman did not answer. The old woman had not answered anybody since the year of the outbreak. Osmond stood in the corridor with his coat over his arm. He watched a woman he employed give the best hour of her week to a room that could not thank her, and something in his chest went wrong in a way he had no word for at all. "You're the one from the buildings." The man beside him was in his 50s, tired, holding a bag of grapes he had clearly bought in a hurry. "Cosimo Nucita. That's my mother. Osmond Vautier. I know who you are. Everybody knows who you are." He said it without heat, watching through the glass. "Look at her walking down here. Slow. Nobody comes into a ward that slow. Everybody comes in quick because they want it over. How long has she been coming? 7 years. Every Thursday. She missed one, and that was when the buses stopped for the snow, and she rang the desk twice. Does your mother know her?" "My mother doesn't know me." Cosimo shifted the grapes. "But she knows somebody sits there. You can see it in her hands." Osmond watched. "Who was she?" "She'll tell you herself, if she ever decides to." Cosimo looked at him properly for the first time. "But I'll tell you the thing she won't. She thinks my mother got ill in a building she surveyed. She's been carrying that ever since. And she didn't. It's in the inquest file. My mother was never in that building in her life. She caught it at the Corvan Club at the ladies' morning 2 streets away." He said it flatly, like a man who had said it before. "I've told her twice. Once in a canteen and once in a car park. And she did not believe you. She heard the words." Cosimo pushed the door with his shoulder. "She's not going to believe a file she hasn't read, and she'll never read it. Because reading it would be looking for a way out, and she doesn't think she's allowed one." He went in. He kissed his mother's head. Luzia stood up and made room for him, and did not let go of the old woman's hand until he had taken it. Afterwards, in the car park, she told Osmond the first part herself. Not because he asked, because he was standing there, and he was not filling the silence. There was an outbreak 7 years ago. 19 people, 1 death, 1 woman who came out of it like that. She nodded at the 3rd-floor window. "I was the assessor of record on one of the buildings on the list. My name is in the report in the index. And the finding, no individual failing." She said it without any expression at all. Nobody was at fault. Nobody was named. Nobody was cleared either, because there was nobody to clear. So you resigned that week, before anyone had to be polite about it. She pulled her sleeves down over her hands. "My registration ran out the year after. You need 2 practicing engineers to countersign a renewal. I asked 5. She got on the bus. He stood in the car park in the cold and understood that he now held a fact about her life, that she did not hold herself, and that handing it to her would be the same as taking something. He said nothing, not because it was easy, because she had spent years being told what had happened to her by people who were not in the room, and he was not going to be the last one. Leonie Kiefer could not take a handle off a tap twice. So she said something else in a different room to the group's property manager, over coffee in the tone of a woman raising a small administrative point. The domestic contract. Does the agency's policy cover theft by staff in occupied units, or only common parts? She stirred her cup. It is not a comment on anybody. It is just that there is no named individual on any of those sheets. 14 buildings, and nobody signs for anything. Nobody agreed with her. Nobody disagreed either. That was enough. It traveled the way the rotor traveled, building to building in the order of the cycle at the speed of a woman with a bucket. At Brentmere, the jewelry box came off the hall table on the Monday. At Aldous, a handbag went upstairs before she arrived and stayed upstairs. At Pallister, a woman she had known for 2 years stood in the doorway of her own kitchen for the whole hour, arms folded, apologizing about the weather. and the versions got kinder as they got worse, which is how these things work. Perhaps she stays late because she has nowhere in particular to be. Perhaps she does the top landings because nobody goes up there. Perhaps she is not unkind at all. Perhaps she is simply somebody nobody has ever checked on. Nobody was rude to her. Not one person. In 8 working days she was moved without a single word being spoken out loud from a person into a procedure. She did not defend herself. She wiped the skirting behind the jewelry box that was no longer there, and she did not mention it to a soul. Osmond found out on the Thursday in his own house, and he did not confront anybody. Instead, he stopped putting things away. His wallet stayed on the hall table. His mother's rings stayed in the dish on the kitchen window. The safe in the study stood open with the door pushed back against the bookcase. He told the housekeeper nothing, and he told the agency nothing, and he never once mentioned it to Luzia. She noticed in the first 10 minutes. She stood in his hall with a wallet on the table in front of her and understood exactly what it was. Then she put the rings in the dish inside a teacup so they could not roll and shut the safe with her elbow and left a note saying where everything was. It went back down the rota the same way the other thing had gone down it. Nobody was told to stop. They stopped. That week he read a page of her old handwriting. It was inside a plastic wallet cable tied to the strainer at Pallister. Years of dust on it. A commissioning sheet nobody had ever taken down. At the bottom in the box for comments in her writing, "No, I am not signing that. Ask me again when the branch is cut back." He read it 3 times. Then he stood at the back of the shed for a while, holding a filthy piece of paper, jealous, in a way he had never been jealous of anything. Somebody had once been told no by her. He had known her 10 weeks, and she had never refused him a single thing. She had refused to leave a landing half done. She had never once refused him. He tried it on that afternoon on purpose. He told her the group would repaint the stairwells in Brentmere green. "Whatever you think, sir. Do you think green?" "It's not for me to say. I am asking you." "Then it's fine, sir." She smiled at him, kind and closed, and picked up the bucket. And he stood there and minded it more than he had minded anything in years. On the Thursday she cracked, and it took 9 words from Cosimo to do it. They were by the recycling bins at the back of the hospital at 8:30 in the evening. In the wet, with a bag of her mother's laundry between them. "She'd have liked you," Cosimo said. "The 2 of you would have got on." Lucia stood very still. "What did she like?" "Sorry. What did she like?" Her voice went. "Cosimo, I have sat with your mother every Thursday for 7 years, and I cannot tell you one thing she liked. Not one. Not a song, not a program, not what she took in her tea. Luzia. I never went to find out. She had a hand over her mouth and she took it away because she was not going to hide from it. I went so that I would be a person who went. That is not sitting with somebody. That is bookkeeping." Osmond was 10 feet away by the car, and he did not move, and he did not speak. He had been about to hand her an umbrella. He stood in the rain and held it and let her have the whole of it. She got herself back on her own the way she got everything back. She blew her nose. She said sorry to Cosimo for the noise. Then she went back up to the 3rd floor at 20 to 9 and asked the staff nurse what Grazia Nusita listened to. She came down 20 minutes later with 3 things written on the back of a bus ticket. A radio station, lemon in her tea and no sugar, and that she had sung in a choir at the Corvan Club on Tuesday mornings for 19 years. She did not cry again for the rest of the story. Nobody ever mentioned it. Not because it was shameful, because she had asked nobody for anything and had gone back upstairs and done the work of getting to know a woman who could not help her do it. Osmond drove her home, and neither of them turned the radio on. He gave her the envelope on the Monday in the caretaker's office at Aldous House and did not stay to watch her open it. The inquest bundle. Cosimo had signed it out of a solicitor's storage on the Friday and put it in Osmond's hands with 1 sentence. "If it comes from me, she'll think I'm being kind." She read it, standing up with her coat on for 50 minutes. Her building was not in it. Her building had never been in it. The ladies' choir met in a function room at the Corvan Club on Tuesday mornings. 19 women, and the shower block off that function room had been out of use for 11 months and was flushed by nobody. And on the third page in the list of contractors serving the Corvan Club water system, there was a company name that she had been walking past on a van twice a week for 2 years. Kiefer. She sat down on the caretaker's stool and did not move for a while. Then she went and got a torch. What she did over the next 3 days, she did in her own time before 7:30 and after 4. She started at Pallister because Pallister was the oldest, and because she still had her own stepladder in the back of the caretaker's shed, with her initials burnt into the stile. In every plant room, in every building, the new copper was beautiful. It came off the incoming main. It ran round the calorifier. It went up into the ceiling, and it was warm and bright and correct for exactly 2 meters, which is the distance a man can see from a plant room doorway without stepping inside. She pushed up the ceiling tile at Pallister at 5:10 in the morning with a torch in her teeth. Above the tile, it stopped. Above the tile, it was the original galvanized system 1974, and the fittings on it carried a maker's mark that had not existed since before she was born. There was a nut on the crossover that had not been turned since men wore hats to work. She put the tile back. She went to Brentmere and did the same thing and found the same thing. She went to Aldous and did not even need the ladder because at Aldous the tile was already loose and somebody at some point had looked and had put it back and had said nothing to anybody. £3,100,000, 2 meters each. Then she found the second thing. And the second thing was worse because the second thing was clever. The temperature sensor at Brentmere was fitted in the cupboard next to the plant room. So was the one at Aldous. So was the one at Pallister. The readings were real. The loggers were real. Years of continuous, honest, auditable data twice an hour, never once out of range. Measured at the nearest outlet to the boiler instead of the furthest one from it. Not falsified. Positioned. You do not lie about the number, she said out loud, alone in a cupboard at 6:10 in the morning. You choose where to stand. The insurance survey happened on the Thursday, and nobody had told the group it was coming. 2 of them arrived at Aldous House at 9, a loss adjuster in a cheap waterproof and a regional principal for the underwriters who had driven up from the coast. When Osmond came in, the regional principal stood up out of a plastic chair in the lobby, and then did not sit down again for the rest of the morning, and could not afterwards have explained why he had done it. Leonie Kiefer came because she always came. She had the folder, the schedule, the logger printouts, and a plant room she could have shown to a photographer. She showed them the plant room. She showed them the copper. She stood by the loggers and talked about compliance and continuity for 11 minutes, and the adjuster wrote almost nothing because there was almost nothing to write. Then he looked up. Sentinel outlet. Furthest point from the plant. Which one is it? And when did somebody last run it? Leonie turned a page. Flat 29. Top floor west. That's not it. Everybody turned round. Luzia was on the 3rd stair, up with a bucket in her hand in a tabard, and she had not intended to say anything at all. Go on, said Osmond. 29 is the top of the west riser. She put the bucket down. But this is 2 buildings. Aldous and the old nurse's block. They were joined in 1981, and the drawings were never redone. The pipe goes across the roof void and comes down into the old block. The furthest point from that plant room isn't a flat. What is it? It's the sluice on the top landing. And I'm the only person who runs it because I'm the only person who fills a bucket up there. The adjuster closed his folder. Show me. They went up 5 flights because the lift only served the new block, which was the whole point, and nobody in that building had ever once said so out loud. She turned the tap on. She put her hand under it. She looked at her watch and said nothing, and the 4 of them stood on a landing and listened to water run. At 1 minute, the adjuster put his own hand under it. At 2 minutes, the regional principal put his hand under it. Nobody said anything for another minute after that, because there was nothing to say about water that comes out of a cold tap at the temperature of a warm bath in a building where the people are 71 years old on average. It sits in the roof void all night, Luzia said. The whole crossover is the old system, 1974 galvanized. Everything downstairs is fed through it. The loggers, the adjuster said. The loggers are honest. They're in the cupboard beside the plant room. She wiped her hand on her tabard. That's the closest outlet to the heat source in the whole estate. You could put a sensor there in a condemned building, and it would pass for 100 years. Leonie Kiefer said that probe position was signed off at commissioning. Yes, said a voice from the stairs. By me. Katri Huovinen was 41 and had taken over Luzia's caseload 7 years ago and had signed every certificate since without ever once being shown a drawing. She had her phone out, and she was already scrolling. I took photographs on the day. I take photographs of everything. She held it out to the adjuster with a hand that was not steady, because I couldn't find the sentinel points, and I was told the drawings were being redrawn and would follow. And did they follow? No. And you signed? Anyway, I did. Katri did not look away from her. For 7 years. And I am going to be paying for that for the rest of my life, and I would rather pay for it than keep it. The footage came last, and it came from the group's own system, which had been installed by the property division to reduce insurance premiums on the common parts. 2 years retained. Corridor cameras on every landing. Nobody had ever watched them because nothing ever happened in a corridor at that hour of the morning, except a woman in a tabard filling a bucket. The adjuster watched the top landing at Aldous. He watched a cleaner turn on a tap and stand there. He watched her look at her watch. He watched her turn it off after 2 minutes and carry the bucket away. And then he watched the same thing on a different Tuesday and a different Tuesday after that. Then he watched the cameras at Brentmere and Pallister and the old block at Kettlewell Green, and there they all were. Different women, different tabards, all standing at taps, all waiting. None of them ever once complaining to anybody because a slow tap is not a thing anyone thinks is worth a form. The system installed to watch the cleaners had recorded the water for 2 years. £3,100,000, Osmond said in the lobby at 1 o'clock. Staged over 7 years. Signed by me. Every payment was against a certified stage, Leonie said, and the refinance completes in 9 weeks, and a Category 1 finding on the residential portfolio ends it. He did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. And you were the contractor at the Corvan Club 7 years ago, and your indemnity insurer has never been told. For a moment, the lobby had no sound in it at all, not the lift, not the door, not the radio in the caretaker's office. Then he said the thing that went round that city for a year afterwards, and he said it quietly, standing in a lobby with his coat over his arm. You did not take a handle off a tap. You took the one place in that building where the water could still tell the truth, and you put it in your coat pocket. Leonie Kiefer did not cry and did not plead. She lifted her chin and said the only defense she had left, and it was the most frightening sentence anybody said that day. 14 buildings. 7 years. Nobody died. No, Osmond said. Nobody was unlucky. That is a different thing, and I pay £3 million precisely so that nobody has to be lucky. 1 person, did, Luzia said. Everybody looked at her. 19 women in a choir at the Corvan Club Tuesday mornings for 19 years. 1 of them died and 1 of them is on Fenwick Ward and hasn't spoken since. She was very calm. Your company held that contract too. I read it on Monday in a caretaker's office for the first time in 7 years because I was too frightened to read it before. Nobody asked Luzia anything at the end. Osmond made a point of not asking her in a lobby in front of people where she would have had to answer with everybody watching. So she said it herself at the door with the bucket in her hand. There is a line in the caretaker's book from the morning it happened. It says nothing occurred and the outlet was being decommissioned. I gave him those words. I would like them taken out. Why? Because it is the only untrue sentence in that book, and I am the one who put it there. She looked at Leonie Kiefer for the first time all morning. She took the handle out of my hand while the bucket was still filling, and 2 residents watched her do it, and I am not asking either of them to say so. You could leave it in. The next woman on that rota will be new. Luzia opened the door with her shoulder. She won't know what a dead leg is, she'll just carry the bucket. That night, a folded sheet of paper came under the boot room door of Osmond's house with no note on it. A home address in the old town. A school, and the times of the school. Nobody had asked him. That was the point. It had already started. He put it in the fire, and made one telephone call and said 4 sentences, and the last 2 of them were about her. She has spent 7 years with nobody to appeal to, because nobody ever accused her of anything. The first ruling that has ever gone her way is not going to be one I made in the dark. Sir, stop it tonight. All of it. The consequences when they came did not come from an inspector. The local authority was told before lunch on the Friday, and a year later had still not written to anybody about it. What moved was money. Kiefer Hygiene's professional indemnity insurer voided the policy back 7 years for non-disclosure of the Corvin Club, refused to defend a single claim, and began recovering what it had already paid. The property underwriters served a notice on the Vautier residential portfolio inside 11 days. 2 other estates cancelled by return of post. A contractor withdrew a tender within the hour of hearing and rang nobody to explain. The refinance died on a Tuesday afternoon in a solicitor's office, and Osmond Vautier signed the works order for the real replacement out of the group's own money at a cost that took the year's profit and most of the next one, and did not mention it to her at all. Leonie Kiefer's firm went under in 9 weeks, not because anybody prosecuted her, and nobody did that year, because no underwriter in the country would stand behind a signature of hers again, and a water hygiene company that cannot be insured is a woman with a van. What went round the estates was not the fraud. What went round the estates was one sentence about a tap handle in a coat pocket, repeated by cleaners and caretakers who had never met each other in half the buildings on that coast by the end of the month. Point-of-use filters went on every outlet in 14 buildings in 3 days. The flushing regime went back into a book with a page for every landing. The top landing sluice at Aldous House went on the register as the sentinel point in writing permanently. They put the offer to her in the study of his house on a Thursday morning, while she was still holding a duster. Group water safety. You'd hold the pen on 14 buildings and everything we buy after them. I'm a cleaner, sir. You're a cleaner who found it. Anybody could have found it. Nobody did. He did not stand up. For 7 years. She put the duster down on the arm of the chair and folded her hands, and he watched her get ready to be polite about it. You can't give me that. She shook her head once. And if this is about a bucket on a landing, I would honestly rather have the bucket. I'm not giving you anything. I am buying something I need and cannot get anywhere else. You need somebody with a license. She said it plainly. Mine lapsed. You need 2 practicing engineers to countersign a renewal, and I have asked 5, and they were all very sorry. Ask Katri Huovinen. Luzia went quiet. She's finished, she said at last. She signed every certificate on those buildings for years. She'll never work again. That is what she thinks too. Then give her the job. I am giving you the job. Then give it to both of us. She leaned forward. Split it. 1 post, 2 people, half the money each, and I'll say why so you can't be sentimental about it. Go on. Because there is exactly 1 person in this county who has read those files as many times as I have. And it's the woman who was wrong about them for 7 years. She will never be wrong about them again. Nobody you interview will have that. She sat back. And because if I take it whole, then in 5 years I'll be the person who signs whatever the schedule says. I've watched that happen to somebody. It happened to her. He looked at her for a long moment. That is the first thing you have refused me. It isn't a refusal. It's a counter-offer. She picked the duster back up. And I'd like to earn it if that's all right. I'd like to be on my knees in those plant rooms for a year, before anyone calls me a director of anything. You have been on your knees in those plant rooms for 2 years. Then a 3rd one won't kill me. They stood at the study window afterwards, both of them looking at the same wet garden, neither of them saying anything and neither of them leaving. It went on long enough to be a thing. The clock in the hall did the quarter hour, and neither of them moved. By the time the scaffold came off Pallister House, the leaves had been off the trees twice. There was no ceremony, because she would not have gone to one. There was a green sign screwed to the wall of every plant room at eye height, with the Sentinel Point named on it, and the words written so that a person who had never seen a pipe could follow them. There was a Flushing book with a page for every landing, and a rule that any cleaner in any building could take a building off service with one telephone call at any hour without asking a manager first. 2 of them used it in the first winter. Both of them were right. There was a lift in the old block at Aldous that went to the top landing now, which had cost more than the sign and the book and the training put together, and which appeared on no announcement anywhere. Nobody carried a bucket up 5 flights in that building again. And there was a page at the front of the Flushing book printed that explained what a dead leg was in 8 lines, in the words a person uses out loud. Katri Huovinen wrote it. Luzia made her take her name off the bottom of it and put both of theirs on, and they argued about that for most of an afternoon, which was the first argument either of them had enjoyed in years. And on the top landing at Aldous House there was a tap with a handle on it, and a second bucket standing beside it full every Tuesday, filled by a caretaker who had never once said that he was the one doing it. Luzia Dapunt walked into those buildings the same way she had always walked into them. Same tabard for the first 6 months, because she would not order a new one until the schedule was finished. Same slow way of coming along a corridor which the residents at Brentmere had started coming out of their flats to catch. Only the sheet was different. Her name was printed on it now in full in the box where the shift code used to go. On the Thursday she went to White Cross General, as she had gone every Thursday without missing one, and she took the radio station and the lemon, and no sugar with her. Grazia Nusita still did not speak. But there was a chair on the far side of the bed now that had not been there before, and Cosimo did not have to fetch one, and on the wall above the locker there was a photograph of 19 women in a choir at the Corvan Club, with one of them in the middle row laughing at something outside the frame. Luzia stayed until 8. Then she went along to the family kitchen at the end of the ward, because the surfaces in there were always sticky and nobody was paid to do them, and she started wiping the table. Osmond came in with 2 coats over his arm and let her get halfway across it. "Come and have dinner with me. Tonight." The cloth stopped. Not a car, not a driver, a table, and a bill, and whatever you want off it. She looked at the table. Half of it was wet and shining, and half of it was not. "It's half done," she said. "I know." She put the cloth down in the middle of it on the dry side where it would leave a mark by morning. Then she took her coat off his arm. "Let it be half done." He held out his hand, not asking for anything, simply offering it. She put hers into it. Neither of them hurried. She was not rescued, and she was not made over, and she was not made smaller. A room was corrected around her, and then another one, and then 14 of them. Not because she had finally been noticed by a powerful man, because she had spent 7 years standing at a tap that nobody would fix, waiting with her hand under the water, until at last somebody stood beside her and waited too. In the family kitchen at White Cross General, a cloth is still lying in the middle of a half-wiped table.